I never expected to feel so invisible in my own family. Yesterday, at Julia's engagement party, I stood in the background, exhausted after pulling double shifts all week as a pediatric nurse. Julia was radiant, the center of attention, effortlessly charming every relative and friend. Everyone applauded her, laughed at her jokes, and praised her glowing future. And there I was, the responsible one, as they call me, the quiet backbone no one really notices. I manage the bills, make dinner, cover the mortgage for our childhood home, but no one talks about that. When Julia pulled me aside during the party, her smile was warm, but her words cut deeper than I expected. "You should be grateful I'm even here," she said softly, almost conspiratorial. It felt like a warning wrapped in kindness. I forced a smile, told myself I was just imagining things. Family can get complicated, but I still believe we can work through anything. The house where we grew up is in my name alone. A secret I keep locked away. A power I don't want to wield. I want peace, not war. But as Julia walked away, laughing with her friends, a small voice whispered that her smile might be hiding more than I want to admit. I can still hear my mother's voice from when I was 15. I had come home with a failing grade in math, expecting understanding, maybe even help. Instead, she sighed and said, "Julia's been working so hard to keep her perfect record. Maybe you need to try harder." She called me lazy, comparing me to my golden sister as if I were invisible. In that moment, I felt the sharp sting of being second best, a shadow in my own family. I tried to accept it as just Mom's way, telling myself she loved us both, just differently. Years later, I discovered Julia had sabotaged my chance at a scholarship by spreading rumors I'd failed a crucial exam. Completely untrue. Our parents never challenged it. They just let the lie hang in the air, like silence was easier than confrontation. Julia's smile was sweet, but behind closed doors, she was quietly cruel. That duplicity shaped so much of my youth, teaching me to swallow my pride and grit my teeth. I learned to rationalize her betrayals, to pretend sibling rivalry was normal. But that wound, deep and raw, never fully healed. For 5 years now, I've carried the weight of our family's financial struggles without complaint. Every month, I pay $1,800 toward the mortgage, keeping the house our childhood sanctuary afloat. Julia and our parents have had their share of hardships, but I've always stepped in, canceling vacations, skipping luxuries, covering medical bills for our grandmother. I've lent Julia over $12,000 without a single thank you, just because I want to help. At family gatherings, my sacrifices disappear into the background, dismissed as the expected role of the responsible one. Daniel, my fiancé, notices. "Are they taking you for granted?" he asks gently, worry creasing his brow. But I tell him I do it out of love, not obligation. Julia basks in the attention, never acknowledging the shadow I stand in. Our parents rarely thank me, often siding with Julia when she complains. Daniel encourages me to speak up, to stand my ground, but I hesitate. The house deed sits untouched in my safety deposit box, a quiet power I'm reluctant to reveal. I hope for harmony, even if it feels like I'm alone in holding this family together. The birthday dinner was supposed to be a simple gathering, but Julia turned it into a battlefield. Midway through the meal, with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes, she dropped a jab I wasn't prepared for. "No wonder Daniel hasn't proposed yet. Maybe Lily's just not good at holding a man." The room froze. I felt the heat rise in my chest, humiliation prickling my skin. Some cousins exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke up for me. My fingers curled tightly around my napkin, knuckles white. For a moment, I wanted to confront her, to demand respect. But instead I stood quietly, excused myself, and slipped out of the room. Daniel followed, voice low and steady. "Don't listen to her." I told myself Julia must be stressed, jealous even. Maybe this was just a bitter moment, nothing more. But deep down, a seed of doubt took root. Was this the start of something darker? I felt hurt, yes, but still clung to hope. For peace, for family. Leaving the room was my small act of resistance, my way of refusing to feed into the drama. But I kept my voice low, unwilling to give Julia the fight she seemed to want. The morning after the birthday dinner, I woke to a strange heaviness pressing on my chest, like the air itself was thick with something unsaid. Julia's subtle smirk had lingered in my mind all night, and now it seemed the poison was spreading. I started hearing whispers, soft but sharp, among relatives during phone calls and texts. Margaret called first. Her voice clipped, a cautious edge I hadn't heard before. "Lily, maybe you're overreacting. You've always been a bit too sensitive, haven't you?" Her words twisted inside me like a blade. I tried to explain, but she just sighed and said, "Julia's under pressure too. You should try to see her point." It wasn't just Margaret. Somehow Julia had whispered her version of events to cousins and aunts, painting me as impossible to please and always jealous. I could almost hear her sweet, honeyed voice behind those curtains of disapproval. When Daniel stood by me, trying to defend my feelings, even he faltered as family members exchanged doubtful looks, their eyes questioning my intentions. I started doubting myself, wondering if I really was just imagining slights, overreacting to normal family teasing. Was I the unreasonable one? Julia's campaign was invisible but relentless, like a slow leak draining my confidence and trust. The warmth I once felt from family was cooling to cold indifference, leaving me adrift in a sea of quiet accusations. I called my mother, hoping for comfort, but her tone was distant, almost rehearsed. "Julia's always been the sensitive one too," she said, "and she's just trying to keep things together." I swallowed the lump in my throat, feeling more isolated than ever. Julia's two-faced nature was on full display. Sweet smiles in person, but behind the scenes, her words shaped a narrative that isolated me from the few allies I had left. I felt a crushing sense of betrayal and helplessness. The family dynamic was shifting beneath my feet, the ground less solid, and I was slipping toward loneliness. I didn't know how to fight an enemy who smiled while stabbing me in the back. Determined not to let this breakdown destroy what remained of our family, I arranged a meeting. I invited our parents and Julia to my apartment, hoping that honest conversation could mend the rift before it widened into an unbridgeable chasm. When we gathered around my small dining table, the air felt thick with unspoken accusations, but I kept my voice calm, steady. "I want us to be a family again," I began, "but I need respect. I've supported you all financially, emotionally. I'm tired of feeling like my efforts don't matter." I looked at Julia, hoping for a flicker of remorse or understanding. Instead, tears welled up in Julia's eyes. Real or staged, I couldn't tell. "I'm the one under pressure here," she protested, her voice trembling but sharp. "You always make me the bad guy. I'm exhausted from carrying everyone's expectations." Before I could respond, Margaret jumped in, her tone cold and dismissive. "Lily's just playing the victim. She's making mountains out of molehills." Tom shifted uneasily, avoiding my gaze. Julia's smirk grew, subtle but victorious. The room felt like quicksand pulling me down. My words dissolved into silence. I left that night heavier, the hope I'd carried now a fragile ember flickering uncertainly. The adults around me weren't ready to be fair or to heal. I realized then that peace was a fragile illusion, slipping farther away with every harsh word. Days later, at our rehearsal dinner, Julia's cruelty struck with a brutal clarity I wasn't prepared for. We were surrounded by friends and family, laughter filling the room, when Julia leaned over and, loud enough for several people to hear, shared a secret I had trusted her with years ago, my struggle with anxiety during nursing school. "Maybe Daniel should think twice," she said with a sly grin. "If Lily can't handle stress, how will she handle marriage?" The room fell awkwardly silent. Daniel's mother shifted in her seat, avoiding eye contact, while a friend whispered, "Is that really true?" Heat flooded my face, shame twisting my stomach into knots. The secret I had buried, hoping to protect myself, was now a weapon wielded against me. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he confronted Julia quietly but firmly. "Why would you say that?" he demanded. Julia shrugged casually, feigning innocence. "I was just saying what everyone's thinking." Her laughter was soft but hollow. The humiliation hit me like a slap. This wasn't a slip. It was calculated damage. Julia was tearing me down in front of people I respected, casting doubt on my professional competence and mental resilience. My support system was cracking, and I felt exposed, vulnerable to the world's judgment. I saw then the full extent of Julia's duplicity. The sister I loved and trusted was the one undermining me most deeply, smiling sweetly as she tore my world apart. In the quiet aftermath, with Daniel holding me close, I knew I had to try one last time. I reached out to Julia privately, offering an olive branch drenched in desperation. "Julia," I said softly, "I want to forgive. I want us to try again. But I need honesty and respect. Can we start over?" For a moment, I thought maybe the sister I loved was still there beneath the bitterness. But her reply was ice. "You want control, Lily." "I'm done playing your game," she said flatly, her voice void of remorse or warmth. The rejection sliced through me, colder and sharper than any argument. My vulnerability was met with contempt. That night, wrapped in Daniel's arms, I whispered the truth I could no longer hide. I did everything I could. His steady comfort was the only balm for my shattered hope. The possibility of peace between Julia and me had died a quiet death, smothered by cruelty and cold indifference. The family I once dreamed of belonged to a past I could no longer reach. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of a painful truth. Some battles aren't meant to be won with kindness. The silence from the family was deafening. After Julia's cold dismissal, it felt like I'd been erased. No longer the sister, the daughter, the dependable one. Margaret stopped answering my calls altogether, and every family gathering became a minefield I didn't want to navigate. Tom's barely concealed avoidance was a fresh sting. He used to be one of my quiet supporters. Now he glanced through me like I was a ghost, haunting the edges of their lives. Julia's gossip had woven a narrative painting me as unstable, selfish, and unreasonable. The poison spread through whispers and sidelong looks. Even distant relatives, once cordial, began to question my motives, casting judgment with an invisible finger. Daniel was my only anchor, but even he grew weary. The strain of defending me against a family turning its back was visible in his tired eyes. He tried to shield me from the barbs, but I saw the exhaustion behind his support. Once I called my mother hoping for a thread of comfort, only to be met with a clipped, rehearsed response that stung worse than any accusation. "Maybe you're too sensitive," she said, her voice distant. Those words echoed in my mind, twisting into self-doubt. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe my instincts were faulty. Maybe I was just overreacting. The crushing weight of isolation settled deep inside me, heavier than any financial burden I'd carried. The house felt colder, the silence in the rooms a mirror to how alone I was. Yet beneath the swirl of confusion and hurt, a small, fragile resolve took root. I realized that continuing to pour my heart and resources into a family that dismissed me was a path to my own destruction. If I didn't protect myself, no one else would. The truth was painful, but clear. I had to reclaim my power, even if it meant standing alone. I clung to the thought like a lifeline, the hope that beneath this wreckage, I could find a way back to peace, but on my own terms. Despite the loneliness, I refused to collapse into despair. I tried to remind myself of who I was beyond their judgments. Strong, capable, and worthy of respect. But the doubts gnawed at me like relentless waves, pulling me under. I could feel my energy draining, the exhaustion of being the family's invisible caretaker morphing into something darker. A recognition that the more I gave, the more I was consumed. I knew things couldn't stay like this. I had to find a way out, but I wasn't sure how yet. All I knew was I couldn't stay trapped in this spiral of rejection and silence. The evening air felt colder as I lay awake, replaying every interaction, every silent glance, every harsh word. The family I'd devoted myself to was becoming a fortress I couldn't breach, and I was left outside, locked out by their cold indifference. I whispered to the darkness, maybe I am the problem, though a tiny, stubborn part of me refused to believe it. Somewhere beneath the pain, a seed of determination was growing. I wasn't ready to give up on myself. Not yet. The night before Daniel and Julia's wedding, I sensed something shifting, a storm gathering just beyond reach. I hadn't expected what came next. Daniel pulled me aside earlier, his face tight with something I couldn't place. Then, later that evening, Julia found a moment alone with him. I didn't see the conversation, but the look in Daniel's eyes afterward was unmistakable. Confusion, hurt, and something colder, resolve. Later, whispers reached me, chilling and sharp. Julia had cornered him, revealing a secret I thought was buried forever. A mistake from my early nursing days I'd confided only to her, trusting her to keep it safe. The betrayal felt like a fresh knife twisting inside. Julia's voice had been venomous. "He deserves to know who he's marrying," she'd whispered, a cruel smile beneath her words. I sat at the ceremony, heart pounding, when Daniel took the microphone unexpectedly, silencing the crowd with a calm but firm tone. "I need to address something," he said, his gaze locking on Julia. My breath caught as he spoke the truth, exposing her lie and revealing that the incident was minor, long ago, and that I had grown from it. The room buzzed with murmurs, some nodding in understanding, others shocked. Julia's face went pale, stunned and exposed. The warmth I had hoped for from my family froze into cold clarity. The betrayal wasn't just behind closed doors anymore. It was out in the open, irreversible. My hope for a supportive family shattered in that moment beneath the bright lights and expectant eyes. But alongside the sting was a strange, clear-headed calm. The veil had lifted, and I saw the depth of Julia's duplicity for what it was. This was no longer about forgiveness or reconciliation. It was about survival and justice. In that instant, I felt a switch flip inside me. The years of confusion, pain, and denial crystallized into something sharp and unyielding. I was no longer the vulnerable sister hoping for peace. I was a woman awakened to the truth, burning with a controlled fire that would not be extinguished. The humiliation I suffered was raw, but from it rose a fierce clarity. I thought of every slight, every whispered accusation, every moment I had swallowed my pride to keep the family together. It all fueled a growing anger, not reckless or wild, but steady and purposeful. That night, in the quiet of our hotel room, I stared at the ceiling, the silence full of unspoken vows. I thought about the mortgage payments I'd made without thanks, the house deed in my name, the emotional labor I'd shouldered alone. The power had always been there, hidden beneath years of sacrifice and neglect. Now I saw it clearly, and I knew I would wield it not out of spite, but to protect myself. The grief was deep, but it was giving way to resolve. Never again, I whispered into the dark, a promise to myself that I wouldn't be broken by their cruelty. When morning came, Daniel and I sat together, hands intertwined like anchors in a storm. "It's time," I said softly, the weight of what had happened settling over me like a mantle. "I can't keep giving without limits. Julia's toxicity has to end." Daniel's nod was steady and sure, his support unwavering. We talked quietly but with purpose, outlining the steps I would take. No more financial loans, no more covering debts or household costs, no more emotional labor for a family that refused to see me. We agreed to keep the plan close to the chest for now, shielding it from premature backlash. I knew Julia was the heart of the problem, but I also understood that pulling back would send ripples through the entire family. It wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, maybe even more pain. But I was ready to stand firm, to claim my peace with calculation rather than emotion. With Daniel beside me, I felt a new calmness, a strategic clarity that transformed my hurt into a quiet war being waged on my terms. The battle wasn't loud or explosive. It was deliberate, steady, and necessary. The family I once gave everything for was no longer my burden to bear alone. The fight had begun. I sat at the kitchen table, papers spread around me like a battlefield map. Every bill, every receipt, every transaction was a thread in the web I'd woven to hold this family together. I began to list the dependencies, cold and clinical in my mind. The mortgage alone was $1,800 a month, a burden I'd carried without complaint. Then the utilities, which came to around $450 monthly, not to mention the grocery deliveries I'd arranged for my parents, even Julia on occasion. But it wasn't just money. There was the emotional labor, the late-night calls to Julia when she claimed to feel overwhelmed, the counseling sessions with Mom when she feared falling apart, even Tom's quiet moments when he needed someone to listen. All of it fell on me. What shocked me most was the personal loans to Julia, over $6,000 a year, quietly handed over in texts and casual conversations, never once questioned. Margaret's medical bills, too, were tangled with my credit card statements. She'd depended on me more than I realized. I leaned back, the weight settling heavy on my chest. The truth was undeniable. They relied on me far more than I relied on them. I wasn't just the family's caretaker. I was their financial anchor, their safety net, and for years, I'd been invisible beneath their feet. Determined to understand my standing, I contacted my attorney, a steady voice in the chaos. We pored over the house deed, the payment ledgers, and the bank statements. The house was mine. Legally, fully mine. Julia and our parents had no claim. The loans I'd given Julia were documented in texts and bank transfers, a paper trail I'd never considered a weapon before. I began compiling everything meticulously. Emails, messages, payment confirmations. My hands trembled as I realized these documents were more than proof. They were leverage. The family needed me. I held the power they didn't even realize they depended on. I felt a cold clarity settle over me, a stark contrast to the warmth I'd lavished on them for years. The thought was both terrifying and empowering. With these vulnerabilities mapped out, I could set boundaries, firm, unyielding. Without a word, I could dismantle the fragile safety nets they'd come to expect. I wasn't just a victim of their indifference anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. The power was mine, quietly amassed, waiting for the moment to be wielded, and that moment was coming. For now, though, I breathed deeply and set the papers aside. The first step was understanding. Step 2 would be execution. But for that, I needed patience, precision, and a plan rooted in cold strategy rather than emotion. The family I'd built my life around was fractured, but I was no longer the one breaking. I was gathering strength in the silence. The days that followed were quiet but purposeful. I moved carefully, like a shadow weaving through a house I'd long known, but was now seeing anew. My first act was practical. I changed every password I could think of: bank accounts, online stores, even the shared streaming services. Julia's number was removed from financial notifications, and I instructed the bank to send all alerts directly to me, no exceptions. I knew she'd notice eventually, but for now, she remained oblivious. The same went for Mom and Dad. Their access to joint accounts was limited without fanfare. It was a silent tightening of the reins. Legal documents were updated with my attorney's help, reinforcing my sole ownership over the house and financial assets. We discussed protective measures in case of backlash, restraining orders, financial safeguards, but I buried those thoughts beneath layers of calm. In family dinners and weekend visits, I smiled and laughed as usual, my voice warm, my presence unchanged. No one suspected the storm gathering beneath that calm exterior. Julia's glances were sharp, but she said nothing, perhaps sensing the subtle shift, but unable to grasp its full meaning. In moments alone, my chest tightened with anticipation. It was the calm before the storm, the eerie quiet that precedes upheaval. Daniel noticed the change too. One evening, he took my hand and said quietly, "You're different, but I like it. Stronger." His reassurance was a balm. I allowed myself the small comfort of shared resolve while maintaining the facade my family expected. I was still Lily, the nurturing sister, the dependable daughter, but inside, I was steel. The tension was palpable, though unseen. Julia tested boundaries subtly, dropping hints in conversation, pushing for sympathy, but I deflected with practiced ease. The cracks in our family's foundation were widening, but I kept my footing firm. No outburst, no emotional collapse, just quiet preparation. I was ready. The family thought I was the same, but I was a different woman now. A woman who understood the power of her position and wasn't afraid to use it. One afternoon, as dust motes floated in the slanting attic light, I rummaged through an old box of family papers, searching for forgotten mementos. My fingers brushed against a sealed envelope, yellowed and heavy with age, addressed in my grandfather's careful handwriting. Heart pounding, I peeled it open to find a letter that changed everything. My grandfather's words spilled out in elegant script, revealing a secret long buried beneath years of silence. Margaret had redirected a substantial portion of my inheritance, over $200,000, into Julia's name. I stared, disbelief freezing my blood. The letter detailed how Margaret, under Julia's influence and pressure, had manipulated legal trustees to exclude me from the bulk of the estate. It was not mere favoritism. It was active theft and betrayal at the highest level. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My mother, the woman I'd trusted most, had been complicit in a scheme that robbed me of my rightful legacy. Julia's resentment wasn't just envy, it was greed, and it had poisoned the entire family from within. My hands trembled as I reread the damning sentences. The weight of the betrayal settled deep inside, a cold fire burning through years of denial and hope. This wasn't just about stolen money. It was the foundation of every lie, every slight, every moment I'd been undermined. For the first time, I held proof that the fractures in my family were intentional, engineered to keep me beneath them. The letter was a weapon, one that could expose Julia's facade of sweetness and reveal the corruption festering beneath. As I folded the letter carefully, I felt a fierce resolve ignite. The stakes were higher than I ever imagined. This was no longer about saving a family or seeking peace. It was about justice, raw, unflinching, and necessary. I slid the envelope back into the box, my breath steady but my heart racing. I now carried a secret that could shatter them all. The game had changed, and I was ready to play on my terms. The first moves of my quiet rebellion began with a simple phone call. I contacted the mortgage company and informed them, calmly and firmly, that I would no longer cover the payments if Julia or my parents failed to contribute their agreed shares. The line was silent for a moment before the agent acknowledged. It felt like throwing a stone into a still pond, but I could already hear the ripples forming. Next, I sent texts to Julia, curt and unyielding. No more loans, no more co-signing credit applications. The words felt foreign coming from me, sharp and final. The household help stopped without fanfare. No more grocery deliveries, no more utility bill payments from my accounts. The silence that followed was deafening. Overdue notices arrived like clockwork, and Julia's credit card was declined in public once, the embarrassment seeping through her carefully crafted mask. Margaret's medical bills began piling up, and for the first time in years, the family felt the strain of their dependence. Julia confronted me one evening, eyes flashing with anger. "What are you doing, Lily? You can't just cut us off." I met her gaze steadily, voice low and composed. "I'm setting boundaries. It's time you stand on your own." Daniel stood nearby, watching the exchange with a quiet pride. He saw the transformation. The woman who had suffered in silence was now a force, measured but unyielding. The cold withdrawal was devastating in its precision, a methodical stripping away of the safety nets they'd taken for granted. Julia's confident facade cracked, revealing flickers of desperation beneath. The family's fragile dependence began to unravel under my control, and I felt a surge of something I hadn't allowed myself before: power. The first round was over, and the game had shifted. I was no longer the victim, but the architect of my own destiny. The room fell into a tense hush as I stood up, clutching the aged envelope with trembling hands. Every eye turned toward me, the noise fading until only the sound of my steady breath filled the space. I cleared my throat, fighting the lump in my throat that threatened to betray my calm. "I have something I need to share," I began, voice measured but unwavering. I pulled the letter from the envelope and held it up for all to see. This letter from our grandfather reveals the truth about the inheritance. I let the silence stretch before continuing. Margaret diverted a significant portion of what was meant for me, funneling it to Julia. I laid the documents on the table, the faded ink and official seals speaking louder than words ever could. Julia's face drained of color, her usual confident mask slipping for a fraction of a second. Margaret avoided my gaze, eyes flickering to the floor, unable to form a response. Daniel stepped forward, closing the slight distance between us, silently lending his strength. Murmurs rippled through the room, shock thick in the air like a physical presence. I held their gazes one by one, steady and unflinching. For years, I've carried this family. Financially, emotionally, everything. That ends now. My voice grew stronger, sharper. If Julia and Mom want any relationship with me, They must first make things right, Julia stammered, her protests weak and desperate against the weight of the proof before them. Some relatives exchanged subtle nods and quiet smiles, their respect for my courage evident. No tears or shouting, just an undeniable shift in power. The sister who was once overlooked now held the upper hand, and Julia's carefully constructed world was cracking. The aftermath was immediate and relentless. Julia's calls turned frantic, her voice dripping with false remorse as she promised to repay every cent. Flowers appeared on my doorstep. Apology texts flooded my phone, each more elaborate than the last. But I stayed unmoved, my boundaries as solid as the evidence I held. No more loans, no more cover-ups. The atmosphere at family gatherings turned strained. Whispers grew louder as others began questioning what they once accepted blindly. Margaret's once untouchable reputation crumbled, her presence at events reduced to awkward appearances and uncomfortable silence. With no financial cushion to fall back on, Julia's debts ballooned. Debts I once softened with quiet generosity. She was isolated, her manipulations exposed and ineffective. I watched the family's fragile equilibrium topple, an unsettling mix of relief and sorrow washing through me. This was justice, not vengeance, balanced and necessary consequences born of truth. Julia's desperation grew sharper, more toxic. Threatening messages appeared in my inbox, accusations hurled publicly on social media painting me as the greedy villain. She claimed to be the injured party, twisting narratives with venomous precision. Her flying monkeys rallied, cousins and distant relatives pressing me to forgive, to forget, to reconcile. Even hints of legal battles surfaced, the absurd claim that I was attempting to steal the family, making me almost laugh if the pain weren't so real. But I was prepared. I blocked every channel except through my attorney, refusing to engage with her venomous pleas. Slowly, some family members who had doubted me came forward privately, their apologies sincere but tinged with regret. Julia's bravado collapsed piece by piece, leaving her more isolated than ever. Her mask shattered, and no ploys or threats could rebuild the bridge she burned. I stood calm and resolute, untouched by her storms. The tables had turned, and the victory was unmistakable. 6 months later, I sit in the quiet sanctuary of the home that's rightfully mine, the sunlight filtering through the curtains, casting soft patterns on the walls. Daniel is beside me, his hand warm in mine, a constant in a life now free of chaos. Family gatherings are smaller, filtered down to those who respect our boundaries and choose honesty. Julia remains estranged, her absence a silent testament to the cost of betrayal. Margaret keeps her distance too, a shadow of her former self, adjusting to the changed family landscape with a resigned acceptance. I breathe deeply, feeling a peace I've never known before. I don't miss the chaos or the false smiles. I whisper to myself, this freedom, this peace, is born from standing up for myself. I've learned to give on my terms, no longer the invisible pillar bending under others' weight. The house is more than bricks and mortar. It's a symbol of my autonomy and strength. Scars linger, yes, but they no longer define me. The past's shadows still flicker but cannot touch me. The future is mine to shape, steady and bright, on my own terms.